Welcome to another episode of ConunDRUM. I am super excited for this week's guest. He is a well-respected and ultra-talented musician. He's Music PEI's Musician of the Year for 2021. I call him Cuz. It's Roland Beaulieu. It was a lot of fun getting to catch up with Roland. I mean, we reminisce about growing up with music all around us. He shares stories playing in bands with his dad when he was in his preteens, how he developed his awesome guitar skills using a cassette player and popsicle sticks, and so much more. It was a great chat. I'm not going to keep rambling. Here's my conversation with Roland Beaulieu. That's fucking funny.
Yeah. How you been?
I've been doing great, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah, not bad. I mean, considering.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody's kind of up shit creek right now. So
I lost a string of gigs here in the last week. They've been locked down, so it's been pretty
okay.
crazy.
So you guys are in full lockdown.
Well, I think they allow takeout at restaurants and stuff, but that just means there's no gigging, right? There's no.
Yeah, no, of course not.
There's a while I was lucky and I was getting around, and even with limited capacity and social distancing and stuff, I could still do the gigs, and they're allowing me. They're even giving me a full fee and everything. So the club owners here are just so great. There's some really great people here that really love the music thing here, and they're really trying to support it. So I was super lucky to be working at all. Mm-hmm. But right now, everybody's hands are tied, so there's nothing they can do.
Fuck.
Yeah,
that's bullshit. But I mean, it's the same thing here too. Like all the bars, pubs, anything that would have acoustic shows or any type of live entertainment, they're just all closed and doing just takeout. And even the takeout now, I just got takeout the other day from a local restaurant, Mike's, and you call in your order, they take your name and your phone number, and then you go sit in the parking lot, and then they call you to come in so that you're the only one in to pick up your food. So they're alternating like that. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty strict right now.
Yeah,
but,
but you can't complain. You got to work with it.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So yeah, the format of the show, just to get to know people and have tell stories and stuff. And I mean, I've known you my whole life, literally my whole life.
Yeah, for sure.
You're around a couple of years before me. So
I had a picture of you in a sink getting a bath too, but I thought that might not be appropriate.
Yeah. It's the waist.
That's
up.
How long I've known you.
The waist up. Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna get to know, I want you to kind of tell the story from the beginning, because I know our mothers share the Girouards.
Sure.
And so we get music from that same side.
Sure.
And then I get it from my father's side, but you also get it from the Beaulieu side.
Yes, that's right.
And you get that in spades. I think the Beaulieus are more musical than the Pinots were. So, so growing up in a house with, music constantly,
it was hopeless.
You're kind of destined, right?
I tell people all the time, actually, that if, people often mention things God-given talent and so on. And I get it, but I watched your interview with Dan, which was great, by the way, with Danny Bourgeois.
Thanks.
If you haven't checked that out, you got to look at it because it's great. Danny's awesome. But it reminded me of us growing up, right? Having music instruments in the house since we were, I started guitar at 6, right? So, I mean, and I always tell people that if you didn't play an instrument in our family, you'd probably be weird.
Or sing.
Yeah, I mean something, because it's just what we did. It was what we did all the time. One of us had a guitar out singing a tune or learning a tune, or Dad had to rehearse for a rehearsal that was in the basement on a Thursday, let's say, which was below my bedroom, which I would fall asleep to. So, that was just like you. I mean, I remember Dad and your dad playing in a band, and you guys were doing the same thing. I mean, your dad was at our house quite often rehearsing, or Dad was at your place doing the same, and people don't know, but Dan, your brother, has been my best friend, I would say, for sure, more than he is my cousin. So we were like two peas in a pod since we were probably grade 1.
Oh yeah, talk about pictures. There's lots of pictures of that.
Yeah. So music was just kind of, I mean, like I say, it's kind of hopeless. And then on the weekends, the big treat would be to go to the Girouards, and that was where there's things that I probably maybe shouldn't share about that, in terms of it's just a different time, drinking and all that sort of stuff. And I remember God, I mean, I remember everybody, there's so many cousins, so many cousins. How many is on my mare's side? Is there
Oh my
18
God.
or something like that?
For mom and your mom, like brothers and sisters, there was
Yeah.
18, but two of them passed. So there was
That's right.
16 brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that's it.
And
That'd be
then
16.
they all had big families, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's just tons of cousins. And I remember when it would be Friday and we're like, oh, are we going to Javers? Are we going to Javers? We're going to go to my mare's, right?
Yeah, my mare's,
we'd get there and then we'd see you guys. We'd see like all the ones from downriver and we'd see. So, and then it was just this massive like love fest of there were games outside. We would go play in the woods. We were,
lawn darts,
all kinds of trouble. And then, the uncles and the aunts and everybody else were inside partying it up and playing tunes. And that was just kind of the climate. I mean, it was every weekend, which, obviously I took it for granted. I don't know about you, but I mean, it's kind of like what we did. And only like years and years later, you inventory that and you look back and go, wow, that's a pretty wild way to grow up. Like,
yeah, it is.
And thank God, there was a lot of good people around too. Like, even though there was questionable things happening in terms of like, say, the drinking and the partying, which we all kind of knew was like, but nobody really gave a rat's ass at that time about that stuff.
No. And it was never malicious. It was just all in the venture of having a good time and being with loved ones and having fun.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I remember like, and then when my mare and Pepere got older, and the party kind of moved to Uncle Charlie and Aunt Blanche,
right?
And because they had the bigger,
that's right,
the big house with a huge kitchen. I remember when they remodeled it, and it was huge kitchen, so there was lots of room. People were then dancing, kind of more room for that. And I remember
speaking of dancing after you're speaking. Here we go. We're going to do the I remember thing often, probably, but. There was one, I don't know, you were quite a bit younger than me, right? I was trying to figure that out. How much younger are you than me? Probably 10 years?
About 9 or 10, yeah. Dan's 9 years older than me.
Okay, right. I think he's older than me by a year. So
I think so, yeah.
But
you were in between Dan and Bernice.
Right.
Yeah.
We left Mamare's one night, and there was, I don't know how many cars in the parking lot there at Mamare's. It wasn't a driveway, it was a parking lot.
Yeah.
And our uncle and aunt, I won't name names, the crazy ones, decided to put on a big show for us right there at nighttime with like, I don't know how many people standing on the porch and just watching them and laughing like it was a giant show. Like and that kind of stuff went on all the time. There was comedy. There was just constant. I just have nothing but great memories about that stuff.
Yeah. Same here. So
cool way to grow up.
Yeah. Growing up with that, like you say, kind of taking it for granted, and not really understanding or realizing the level of talent that was in the room. Yeah.
I mean, I always, right now I'm at a place in my life, I'm 50 now. So, I mean, I'm at a place where things like fiddle tunes, which I hated as a kid because I was all about Eddie Van Halen.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Fiddle tunes were not cool, but now suddenly they're very cool. And you think about all of the exposure that we had to not just the fiddle tunes that our uncles and my dad played and stuff, but the really cool people that came in, like Vince Hickey, who were playing the Chet stuff, or or Doug Pino, who's doing all of the really cool accordion pieces, the Italian music.
Oh my God.
All the different styles. Like those are things that I remember being exposed to at 11, 12 years old and just having my mind blown. I've never heard any music like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I just consider myself lucky to have that kind of exposure at such a young age,
Yeah. Like, oh man, I totally forgot about Doug Pino and the accordion.
Yeah, man.
That was just nuts, and like Uncle, well, we call him Uncle Andrew, but
yes.
To everyone, like Uncle Andre, the ability to walk into a room and own the room, whether it's on the guitar, on the fiddle, on the mandolin, singing or dancing,
like as a comedian.
Or as a comedian, like we just had everybody in stitches constantly, just laughing.
Total entertainer. Yeah.
Total entertainer, like complete package, and he's from like the small town, just, very humble, he would give the shirt off of his back to anyone. Like, and that was, kind of, you go down the list of all the uncles, like not to single him out, but he's one that comes to mind. Like, and then your dad, Francis.
Right.
They were
Driver Francis.
Driver Francis. Like him and Andre they could have been a comedy duo. Like, You know, if we were in California, they could have had their own show. Like it was just that level of comedy and entertainment. Like
I remember telling this story to Matt Rainey over there. He interviewed me at CBC Spin Time and asked me some questions about growing up. And I remember I brought up a story about, as a kid, we'd be like on a Friday night, we'd be watching, Carol Burnett or something like that, or Three's Company on TV, and it'd be like a Friday after supper, 6:37. And I'd be in front of the television, and Dad would get this call, and it would be like, you'd hear, yeah, okay, click, and it would be, Francis, you got to come to the party. It's dying. We need you, and how soon can you come out? And so he'd load up the wood grain station wagon and pound us all into the car, and we'd load up 4 or 5 or 6 different instruments, and I'd watch him go into a cottage somewhere in Sunny Corner and plant himself in the middle of the room and start with a dirty joke, and I would be like 7, 8, like again, questionable, but
yeah,
what a way to grow up, man. Like,
yeah. And like I said, like every weekend, it was either at one place or the other.
It was pretty well.
And it was always, I'd say 30 to 40 people, just having a good time.
And Dad could play. What amazed me with Dad was he could play all night and not play the same tune twice.
Mm-hmm.
He's a machine. And still, like, I mean, you get him going and you guys say like, Dad,
yeah. And how old is he now?
He's 80 now. Yeah.
Like
he's not playing much these days. I think COVID's kind of kicking him in the pills a bit, like it is with everybody, but I'm trying to encourage him to keep it going, because it's, there's a lot more, especially at his age, it's good for him in so many different ways. And I mean, it always is, but
mentally, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And his fingers and all that sort of stuff. And I think it just helps him. Yeah.
Does he have arthritis in his hands?
Yeah. I mean, I have arthritis.
Okay. Well,
yeah, Dad's, it's kind of, I don't know how bad it's progressed, but I mean, it's definitely there. And right before COVID kind of, the full brunt of it came back in again. I think it would have been maybe a year ago. So we're probably in the middle of it. I went up there and I brought my computer and my recording rig up there and my mics, and I started making a record with him, because I just thought it was shameful that I'm not a recording guy, but I love recording. It's actually my biggest passion, but I've never done it commercially and I have no desire to, but I love recording. Mm-hmm. And here I am, this recording guy, and never recorded Dad. Dad's never really had a proper record out. So I thought I could at least put some kind of a thing together that would be better than a living room demo or something like that.
Yeah. So, cassette tape.
Yeah. So and there's lots of that, but so we kind of started, and then the restrictions kind of came in. So my rig is still up there and my mics are still up there. And the idea is that, we'll finish this, but it's been, a while already. And so that's one of my bucket list things I want to do, because Dad's he's still got gas in the tank. He always talks about how old and tired he is, but when he gets going, it's like, good Lord, man. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. It just turns the clock back. Like,
yeah. Well, music is amazing that way. I think, it brings out a part of you that, I mean, you probably know yourself. I've done gigs sick, and, you walk up on stage and I think it's the adrenaline or whatever, but it goes on pause for the set. Yeah. And then, I've gone on break and I had a bucket behind my amp and I'd throw up in the amp until we'd have to play again. Then I'd be okay for another 45. Like I've done that before, not often. It's not something that I've done a lot of, and I certainly didn't enjoy it, but it's funny how you can music can do those things to you,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it transcends. It takes you out of, it's like an out of body experience. Like when people say like they have those moments where they black out, like because like when you go on stage, like particularly at a festival where you have a shorter set, it's like you step on stage and then you step off the stage and like, well, that was it. Like you just,
it's done before it starts.
Like
festivals. Yeah.
And so people are like, yeah, it was a great set. It's like, well, I don't know. I don't remember any of it. So
Can we do it again? Just one more?
Yeah. Give me another 45
warmed
minutes.
Up.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, especially. Yeah, that's tough. You're getting on a festival stage and you're
doing 45s
by the third song and you're halfway through the set, that's when you start to feel good.
Yeah.
And then you're done.
Have you done many opening sets? I remember we did trooper runs and stuff like that. And I think our slot was a half hour. I did April Wine twice. It was a 20-minute set to open. So 4 songs. You're literally done before you start. So you got to
warm up before. Yeah. You got to come in hot.
Yeah.
So going back, because you mentioned Eddie Van Halen. So we're going to kind of go into the
I figured this would happen.
Influences section.
There'd be some roads.
Yeah, yeah. There's going to be lots of roads,
Yeah, for
lots of
sure, man.
trails.
There's lots there.
So I remember growing up, and I probably said this on the podcast before. We had moved from the big city of Newcastle into a smaller town, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. So Dan had his room down in the basement. So he would be listening to music very loud because he was alone downstairs, and he was probably like 13 or 14,
So that'd be
maybe
Rat.
15, something like that. So he was listening to Sabbath and Ozzy,
Right.
Motley Crue. And then upstairs where my sister had her room, she was listening to like Bon Jovi and Def Leppard
Right.
and all that stuff. And then of course, parents being, my parents. So,
Yeah.
it was Conway Twitty and Charlie Pride and all that. So
It's
just
quite a
an
mix.
eclectic all over the map. So I'm assuming in your house it was the same, but I mean, you have siblings that, older than you,
Yeah.
that were listening to stuff. So what was
Yeah.
kind of the palette, I guess you could call it, in your house?
Like for me personally, or for the whole house? Like what was?
Well, whole house, but more specifically you personally.
Yeah. Look, so for me, I remember when I picked up guitar, the first thing I learned was a riff from a Styx song because Robert was listening to Styx. Robert was kind of like my dad, I wouldn't say he was churchy, but he kind of had that church influence in the sense that anything Robert listened to was the devil's music, I think, growing up. And it was really, and Robert was listening to things like Sabbath and Oz and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But early on, it was started really light. I remember seeing Breakfast in America for the first time when I was 6. We moved out of Jane Street at age 7, and it was before that. So I remember seeing Breakfast in America and the record for Styx's Grand Illusion were the 2 first rock records I was probably ever exposed to. And I dug it. I didn't think it was bad at all, but at the time my sisters were really into ABBA.
Yeah, that poppy
and,
dance,
Yeah. And Sean Cassidy and all that stuff, and Leif Garrett and all that really, really poppy stuff. And then Dad, of course, was always the old country, the Don Williams and the Waylon and the George and Merle and all that stuff, because he was gigging then too. So there was always gear in the house, even on that small little house on Jane Street. And then when we moved up to Regina Street, it was kind of the same thing. Robert evolved into Rush. Rush was a massive, massive thing in my house. I'll get into that, but that was a big, big thing. And of course, Van Halen was sort of crept in at that era. So around the turn of the 80s, 81, 82, there was a lot of that going on. And it was like there was a hallway in my house. I have 5 brothers and sisters at the time. All of us were into different music, and we all played music in our room quietly, not quietly, but to ourselves. Yeah. And then Dad would have the living room to do rehearsing and all that sort of stuff and learning tunes. And then by the time I was 12, my dad, I had gotten offers from different people, and my dad liked the idea of me playing with him. I think, because I think it was cool to have your young lad. I mean, they used to prop me up and kind of get me to play these tunes because I was kind of fast fingered at the time. I was like, hey, let the little guy go,
Yeah. Look at my son can do. And like those Prodigy videos on YouTube now.
Yeah. So I would, I remember there was a couple of gigs that he took me to in Bathurst. There was one in Tracadie, which would be, probably an hour away from home, which was a big deal for me at the time. I was about 12. I was playing bass, backing him up, and I could do it like I could play bass falling asleep to the stuff that he was playing. Like it was super simple for me. And if I could see the neck of the guitar, even, it was no problem at all. And I could muster around. A lot of it was just Root 5 stuff. So I could come in and out. And that was kind of my thing. It was kind of as a kid that age, it's like, yeah, my boy's going to play, and they and they're like, what? My dad had the old Hofner Beetle bass, and I would play that because it was smaller bodied. And,
I didn't realize he had that bass, but anyway.
Yeah. I think it was a copy. I don't think it was an original Hofner, but it was, it was a decent little, had the flats on it and stuff. So it sounded really woofy. But yeah. And then, so by the time I was around 12, and Dad he stopped playing for a couple of years. And I remember he was itching to get back into it and didn't know how. So he used this excuse, I think, to Mom to say that, Num Num, he calls me Num Num. Num Num's going to come and play with me at the lounges on Friday. So the lounges were like an earlier gig at the Legion where we could do, I think it was 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours worth of stuff. And that was the first time I remember learning a set list. I was 12, and I had to learn like 52 or 53 tunes, all country stuff. And I had half them in the bag already, but I was nervous, man, because this is a gig, right?
You're like, how old? Like,
I was getting paid $50 for these things, right? that we're getting $100 to do these things, and Dad would split it down the middle with me and give me $50, and thought that was just great. You're there you go, and it was awesome. I mean, it was really great. It was a great experience to start. And then I started getting offers from bands and stuff. Like my uncles were all playing, as you know, Raj and Mark and all those guys were all in bands, and Lewis. And on the other side of the family, there was just all these local bands that were around. My brothers were in a band at a time. Edward and Robert were both in a band. Mm-hmm. So for me, I was like, I just couldn't wait to start. And people were saying, well, I was playing guitar quite a bit in those days. I mean, I may have been getting ahead of myself, but the whole Van Halen thing, Rush thing started probably around 13, 14. Yeah, maybe I'll start there first. So I remember as a kid playing outside, and Robert would get me to learn bass line. So he would come out and get me. I was playing dinky cars in the driveway, and he'd come and get me and teach me like a simple bass line, like Brick on the Wall, let's say, doom, boom, boom, and his buddies all downstairs smoking weed. Listen, my little brother go, and they jam for like 10 minutes, and I'm just sitting there going, dude, this sucks. Like, this is lame. Because I'm just holding down the bottom end for them while they wail and do whatever.
Yeah. Watching them do like, hey, I wanted to do that instead. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't even that. I think I was really bored with bass at that time, because I was playing a lot of I was starting to play a little more interesting guitar stuff. Like the rock stuff started to bend my ear a bit. I was getting away from the stuff that Dad liked. And Robert started to have a big influence on me, because I was becoming a teenager and, wanting to wear like tiger striped shirts and getting the big hair going. And I was walking like them, talking like them, you know what I mean?
That decade, man.
Yeah. And then I remember hearing Van Halen 1 for the first time still. And I just couldn't believe that was a guitar. I couldn't believe it sounded like it was sped up. It sounded all these different things in my head. I was just a little kid. So it was like, I just couldn't understand how that could be done at all. Like, and then the real eye opener for me as a guitar player. So I started to play a little bit of bass with them, and cause it was easy. But Robert always played guitar, and Robert's best friend, as you know, was the drummer. So it was Robert and his best friend and myself that would form a little bit of a trio. And I was a real good fit there. I played bass, easy. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to play bass. And then they got me into Rush. And what happened was the Rush light went off, because I started learning all these Getty lines, around 13, 14. And it was like the first tune I think I remember playing of Rush was Red Barchetta, learning Red Barchetta, and then Tom Sawyer and all those lines. And they were just busy and interesting. And I'm like, oh, and then, and you hear like the speakers, cooking in Getty's rig. Like I still to this day, my default bass sound, I still play bass. Like I consider myself a bass player as much as I do a guitar player, and even a drummer as much as I am a guitar player. I just don't get to play them as much as I want to. And when I play bass, I find that I would much rather go for a fusion type of thing on a bass rather than just playing straight country stuff. I've have so much experience playing that stuff, just because that's where the money was, playing out. But as far as like what I want to do on a bass, I would love to do those kinds of gigs, like the real aggressive kind of tone where there's dirty and snarly and like that roundabout kind of, real grindy kind of tone. I love that stuff. Yeah. And I still go for that, like bridge pickup on a J bass and get the amp dirty. Like I love that sound. I just real.
I mean, it's what you grew. It's what you grew up with. So you always harken back to those initial moments, right?
Yeah. And so I got into that. I was jamming with them quite a bit at that point. I was starting to learn some Rush tunes, starting to have some fun playing bass. And I remember not realizing, like thinking, oh, what should I do? Should I play bass or should I play guitar? Should I play bass or should I play guitar? And Robert was like one of those guys too, that was like, you can't play with a pick. You got to play with your fingers, and he'd smack my hand if he caught me with a pick. Cause there's some tunes that I would hear on the radio or whatever that were clearly done with a pick. So I'd be playing with a pick and he'd come home, he'd like whack the pick out of my hand, get out of there, play like a man and all this stuff. So it forced me to use my fingers. I can
visually see him do it.
Oh yeah. And I was a pain in the ass to him. I remember he had a high watt 50 watt head back in, I would have been probably 14, 15 when I was starting to get really into guitar. The thing that lit me up on guitar, I have to say this. So Getty and Rush was the bass, launching pad. Yeah. And then guitar was the Eddie was the guitar thing. But around that same time, maybe around, it was probably around the same time, Robert somehow got a hold of this cassette that was called Starlicks. Do you ever hear those?
Starlicks?
Yeah.
No,
in the back of like Hit Parader magazine, there'd be these ads with this dude with a guitar, and he had this spandex, and the biggest Wolf Marshall, his name was. And he would take somehow he would learn these pretty much note for note. They were really close, like if not bang on most of the time. And he would slow them down, right? Slow the licks down. So he would break down bits of Eruption, bits of the solo, and You Really Got Me, bits of this, bits of that. And I was like, oh, because I remember Robert and I each had a Ghetto Blaster that we wore out. I don't know how many Ghetto Blasters when we were kids. I shouldn't even call them that. Should I change
Ghetto
that?
Blasters?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
you might want to edit
what
that.
They called them.
We used to
cassette stereos.
Take the cassettes players that we used, and the buttons would break from rewind play so many times. Mm-hmm. And we figured out that if we pull the buttons out, we could use popsicle sticks with our feet and wedge it inside and use them as levers so that we can work the controls to keep from bending down, to keep, press play, stop, press, so
it's a waste of time.
Rewind play. And you could hear it over and over and over again. So my ear training was listening to solos, and I would listen to a cluster of notes, and I'd take a second and I'd try to break it down. And then, no, that's not it. Rewind again. No, that's not it. Rewind again. So that was what I was doing. And I was wearing out cassette stereo players. I was wearing out the motors and breaking them. And then I found this really cool discovery one time where if you press rewind and play simultaneously, it actually slowed it down a little bit.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was another little trick. But so when Wolf Marshall came out with these cassettes, and my brother got one, and they were literally slowed down, like to warp speed slow, it was like, oh my God. So I was picking all this stuff up. Every time Robert would go to work, I would go into his room and I'd hop onto his rig. He had a high watt, he had pedals, he had like this Ibanez Roadster guitar, which was like, a hot 80s type guitar,
Mm-hmm.
And I was just all day long. I would play that thing all day long. And he would work as a mechanic at Kmart. And as soon right before he'd come home, I'd put the guitar back on the rack and sneak back into my room and play my piece of crap.
That's hilarious.
Then,
this story is hilarious because it's a parallel that I have.
Well, the bad part of that was that Rob would go to a gig on a Friday because he was a gigging guy. He'd pack all his stuff up and go to the gig, hour away. And when he'd open up his guitar case, there'd be like 3 strings left on it, not a battery, and his pedal board worked. This is before we had like one spot power supplies. Everybody had 9 volts back then, right? When 9 volts were $6 a battery, and nothing would work. And he'd have no strings, and he's just like, that little son of a bitch. And he would get so mad. And I'd be going, but I was picking this stuff up. I was just eating it like for dinner. And I can't, I taught for a number of years through the 90s. I had probably 30 or 40 kids a month for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And when you teach, you're forced to go back and figure out how you learned so that you can teach it. Right. So I remember thinking about that whole process and how, you can't, I was so passionate to learn. I loved the process of learning. I could sit with the guitar all day long. Nobody needed to tell me how to play. Dad never said to take lessons. I wanted to play hockey is what I wanted to do, but that cost way too much money. And
it still does.
It was tough for me at the time to start midway. I was not I didn't go into the mites and the midgets and all the things that they had back then to work my way up. Mm-hmm. But there was instruments all over the house. And once the spark got lit, and this is what I was trying to tell students, that if there's no fire within you, right? If there's no burn to learn, then you're never, ever going to get to a place where you're looking at the greats and going how do they get that good? They're just, the lightning bolt hit them. Every single time you look at a guy that's amazing, like a Tommy Emmanuel, whatever, that's just thousands and thousands of hours of sheer commitment and blood and guts.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they say, that you put in your 10,000 hours, to get to success.
Yeah, for sure. But I even think it's more than that. There's a finesse thing. And when you got that kind of passion, then that addresses a whole other aspect of your playing that comes out. You look, Dan Bourgeois is a great example of that. I remember seeing Dan when he was 14 on TV in Moncton on community TV, doing a drum solo. It was a dissect 5 tune. Mm-hmm. And he's doing this drum solo. And I'm like, who is this kid? Holy smoke, But Dan, when you watch Dan play, he looks like he's going to die tomorrow. It's the last thing on earth he looks like he wants to be doing, It's you know what I mean? The earth is going to end and this is his last drum gig. That's how he plays. I find all the time. He's got it in his face. He's got it in his body.
Yeah.
And I found that that was kind of what lit me up. Those tapes really got me access to, like, it became possible, right? Because I can see that there's a wall when you have a kid coming in that's learning, and you know you play this real cool thing, and they're putting their hands and they don't even know how to hold a pick or hold a guitar without it falling down. That's a pretty big wall to climb when you're looking at a guy like Eddie and trying to break that all down and assimilate what that is. But as soon as I saw that there was a possibility that there was, oh, that's what that is, and then that, once you get the technique, you realize that, oh, he's doing this over on that solo also. Well, just a different set of notes.
Right.
He's noodling that. Now you kind of hear it. Your ear becomes tuned to it. And then you're like, oh, I get it. You know?
Yeah. It's like getting the difference when he's soloing with the pick, or when he's, you know, doing the finger tap on the fretboard. Like you can tell the difference from the sounds. Yeah.
I mean, Eddie was an aggressive player, but very strong right hand. And, you know, everything about his playing was like, when he attacked, you could hear the wood hitting this, when he hits the you know, the fretboard, you can hear the wood, you know, and so that was a style. And that was sort of the really the thing that kind of set my ass on fire as far as playing at all. Like, you know, just because everybody after Eddie, in my mind, was a version of him. You know, they evolved what he, like, I take Steve Vai, for example, or Joe Satriani. I love Joe Satriani. Joe blew my mind as a writer and, you know, melodic player. Beautiful stuff. Really, that was a really cool experience too. One that I shared with your brother. I discovered Joe Satriani with your brother. Yeah. And our cousin Steve, God bless his soul. Yeah. We taped Surfing with the Alien off of Moncton's Station. It was one side of Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien that they played to preview it because it wasn't available in Canada. And your brother and I went there with a cassette tape because we knew it was going to be played. And we'd read about him for months in Guitar Player and just didn't know who this guy was. Yeah. But we had to hear it because everybody's talking about him. Yep. And we're at Steve Joer's that day on a Saturday. And we remember we taped it and we wore it out. And it was like 8 months, I think, before, or even maybe a year before it came to Canada. We got to hear side B to Surfing with the Alien for the first time. But that whole thing, like even Joe, like, no disrespect to Joe. I mean, I'll get killed on this probably on YouTube comments, but everything to me, just for me, you know, I'm not saying this is gospel, but to me, Ed was kind of the pioneer of that whole thing, and everybody kind of just sort of merged out and did their thing. Now, would there have been other people if Ed wasn't around, of course, but you know, Ed really lit it for me. That was he kind of blew the door open. Like he allowed. It's like, you know, the all boats rise with the tide, right? So he kind of lifted everybody and made them kind of push themselves and discover things that they probably might not have ventured to do. Like, 100%. And I mean, that's the same thing with drummers. I mean, everybody talks about Bonham being, you know, the guy, but yeah, he kind of made rock drumming what it is. But then you look at guys like Phil Rudd and I mean, Neil Peart, and like, they're all different styles, but you know, I guess it's sort of like what you say with the Ed thing. It's like, you know, there's before Ed and then there's after Ed. Right. So, yeah. And it, like, I never ever subscribed to the whole, I mean, in the 80s, I remember when your brother and I we hung out, we were like together all the time. And the big thing in the 80s was, who's the faster guitar player? Who's the fastest? Because everybody, and still people do that stuff, you know? They do that with, drums. Who do you think's better? I'm like, come on. Like, but, and even in those days, I remember the race was almost over when Yngwie came out. It was like, well, what else are they going to do? I mean, with like 1,600 beats a minute is, you know, it gets kind of stupid after that. Yeah. But yeah, I remember that whole thing for me. Again, Ed was the spark for me. And I already at that point, I loved the process. Like, I loved the idea of improving. I remember thinking that if I'm going to sit in a chair and practice, I'm practicing. I'm not learning tunes. I'm not playing tunes that I already know. I'm practicing. I've got to do exercises. I've got to be better when I leave the chair, even if it's for 10 minutes. Right. Yeah. And I could never do that now. I mean, I still try to do it, but I do it in very small bits of time. Whereas back in those days, I could sit with the guitar for 8 hours. I got cassettes loaded with stuff of me just. Well, I mean, with that, you know, life comes responsibilities and distractions that, you know, take you away from being able to do that. And then your mind, like you say, it's a mind training, like to be able to sit down and do one task for, you know, 15 minutes at this point, like just with everything being just so fast paced, right? What's that? I said, squirrel. Yeah, exactly. You know, but, and that's the kind of the culture of what it is today. I mean, you look at like just the way music is consumed, like, you know, I remember
going to the record store and waiting for an album to come out, and then going home and digesting that album over and over and over again from cover to cover.
Yeah.
And now like that just doesn't exist. Like now it's, oh, you get the single. Sure. Bands used to release singles back then too, but now everything that's released is just a single. Like,
well, I remember when I worked with a guy named Corey Gallant. I don't know if you've heard of Corey's stuff, but he's a country artist from PEI here. Great guy. Danny produced him actually.
Yeah.
And I remember it was such a treat because Corey asked me to help him with the sequencing of the record. And I thought, what a cool thing. Like, and I love that. I love putting a song list on a record together, like the flow. How does it flow? Listen to them all, and kind of, did they tell a story? Is there a way that, how do you want to first launch the record? First, because to me, it's a big deal. You pop a record in, the first thing you hear, what's it going to be? How's it going to make you feel? How long do you take them for a ride before you bring a slow song in? How, is there any other weird ones in there? Where do you stick that, at the front or the finish? How are you going to end the record?
Yeah.
So I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because sequencing is just not a thing anymore. We're in a world of singles. So although, with vinyl coming back the way it is, Joe actually just talked about that recently. He's just launched a new record, and he talked about that very thing, about when they were sequencing the record, how, how important it was for him to make sure that there's song orders to things. He's an album guy, right? There's still album artists out there, thank God. But we're definitely in a singles world.
Yeah. I mean, we did that, like when my band Six Gun Smoke, we put out, we had thought about doing, a song at a time kind of thing, but then all three of us were like, fuck that. We come from the album, that's it. So then we sequenced it. And I mean, we went back and forth, like even just like positioning of what songs 6 and 7 were, like, what would technically end side A and start side B was we looked at it that way. Like, even though we knew it was all going to come out as one thing, all 11 songs, like front to top, but that, like, we will always look at it that way. Like, I don't think like we're working on songs for our next record, and it's the same thing. It's, there has to be this many songs. We're not doing 1 or 2 releases, and that's probably counter to what we should do, but that's just not who we are.
I think that, it's what's authentic. I think that's the most important piece. I don't buy into anything that anybody does anymore. I just don't. I mean, do what you do, and you'll get a tribe that is on the same page as you and run. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
It's not like there's a ton of money anymore in it. Like, have fun doing what you're doing. And
if you can make enough to break even or fund the next thing, then that's all you need. That's all you're going to get.
It's a weird game. I mean, I have had trepidation for many, many years about my career and whether I should go, I mean, as you know, I was full-time until I was about 20. Then I did part-time for most of my life. And then I went full-time, of course, just a couple of years ago, right before COVID. Not smart.
Well, you put out a lot of good stuff. So there was that.
Well, I mean, I'm enjoying it, and I'm at an age where I don't care. I don't I mean, I shouldn't say I don't care. I do care a lot about what I put out there. I mean, I don't want to put out junk, and I'm very fussy when it comes to recording. I don't feel like I have all the tools and the things for recording that I'd like to have. But today you can just do so much stuff with just a laptop and some plugins. Like, it's bananas how far you can go. I'm talking through a mic I rented from Long McQuaid for $40 for a month, and I got a set of cans with it, and I'm recording some really killer demos. Like, I could not do that at all not that long ago. So but yeah, it's a weird place to be. I'm struggling with releasing original content right now, because as much as I want to, like, I feel compelled to do it, there's nothing really driving it but ego. There's certainly no money. There's certainly no. But the idea of getting it out there, really, maybe for me, it has to be more like therapy, where I have so much stuff in my head from over the years, like, lots of songs that I just want to get out there just so that I can get more stuff in. Like, I want to start getting fresher ideas, because I had these things that are sitting and they feel like a wart or a pimple on me that I want to get rid of. It's an awful way to think about a song.
No, but it's totally accurate. Like, you got to clean the attic so you can fill it again. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I mean, the problem for me is I think in silos. So I'll think about something right through all the way to the end. And then I'll go like, okay, does that make sense? If I release a song and I put it out there, it's going to go on Spotify, YouTube, whatever, and I'll, making minus 10,000%. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. We won't get to that.
My thought is, Bandcamp it, $1.99, make my $10 back.
Yeah.
And call it a day.
Yeah.
So I have to really love what I'm doing to spend 2, 3, 4 weeks demoing a song, because that's how long it takes me, because I'm picking at it and playing all the instruments, and I have to produce it, mix it, and wear different hats. And, so there's a lot of moving the process along and then to put it out there and then see what it does, So that I'm having trouble with that these days, but I'm committed to getting stuff done. I've got a few different avenues of original stuff that I'm working right now, which are really good for me because they're healthy, and I'm getting stuff recorded, which is really cool, because that's my happy place. Like when I can sit in a room with, if I have a keyboard rig, guitar rig, drum rig, a guitar rig, I say guitar rig and bass rig, and I'm good. Like you could probably have to feed me, because I would never see the light of day. Like it is definitely my happy place. I keep staring at my monitor. I'm sorry about that. I probably should be. Sorry, I'm not used to this.
I'm looking at my monitor.
Like this. It's totally the first time I've done anything like this.
Well, first, I probably should have said this at the top, but thanks for doing this, because
for sure.
I know we've been going back and forth scheduling and trying to make it work. And I guess if we take to pause and kind of go back as far as influences go, like within your own family, like you mentioned your brother Rob,
right?
I didn't realize that you started playing bass as the first thing that you were playing.
No, well, guitar was first, but I started guitar when I was 6.
Okay.
Bass didn't interest me that much until I got to Getty.
Okay. Today, I suppose. Yeah. As with a lot of people.
Yeah. It was an interesting school to be put through, but
your other brother that has since passed, Edward,
yes,
he was also a big influence.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of my first bands I was ever playing out in was with Edward at around the same age that I was playing with Dad. I joined a cousin's band, with a few cousins on my dad's side.
There's been a few of those.
Yeah, a few of those. And that was kind of cool because, Ed was a great singer. And there was one time I remember, this is a cool story, actually. I remember one night, it was a Saturday night, and I'm trying to think of how old I was just to give it some context. But anyways, it's irrelevant. I probably was about 14, 15 because I was playing in a band at the time. And I remember Dad, my brother Edward, my brother Robert, and myself all got home Saturday night at around 1:30, 2 o'clock with a bucket of chicken. But we're all coming from different gigs. And we sat at the kitchen table and we realized this is kind of wild. And we're all, how's your gig? Oh, not bad. How many people do you have? We're talking, eating chicken. This is pretty neat.
Was it Chuck Wagon or Dixie Lee?
I think Dad was a Dixie Leer. Robert, I think, was a Chuck Wagon guy. I don't know what I would have had. I can't remember what I would have had. Yeah, but I thought it was kind of cool. We're all in different groups at the time. And we always thought it was weird that we never really did anything together as a family. Like it's just bizarre. I don't know. We just kind of never did it. I have a project coming up actually this summer, COVID, willing.
Yeah.
It's going to be the first Beaulieu show.
Oh yeah.
We're playing at the Miramichi Folk Song Festival.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be neat. I'm going to try to do like a whole, it's not a very long set. I think it may be an hour, maybe 45 minutes or an hour, something like that. But we're going to try to pack it up and do, we're going to try to do it, like start with Dad doing the trad thing and then work into some kind of countryish thing and then end up with a progressive kind of like, maybe a couple of Journey tunes or a Toto tune or something like that.
Right. To
kind of finish it up. I'm not really sure how we're going to make that work yet, but I'm not too worried about it. We can make it work. We've done it before. Yeah.
Yeah. So who's going to put together the lineup?
Not on stage. It's the family. It's me, and we're going to get Lucas involved, of course, because he's basically family now.
Well, yeah.
I should mention to the audience that Lucas, my brother's best friend, ended up marrying my sister. So
yeah, and he's a phenomenal drummer.
Phenomenal drummer. Yeah, it was a really cool way to grow up. We played last year for the first time in a long, long time, and what kills me when I play with those guys is that, especially with Lucas, like as a bass player, you want to lock with the drummer. You want to, that's a big deal. And Lucas is just one of those guys that when I grab a bass and we start jamming and playing stuff, I'll do a run or I'll do some little thing, and he's right there. It's exactly the same vocabulary, So we're always using the same little nuances, and we'll look at each other and kind of grin. And those are things that happen. And here we haven't played in years, and we got together last year, and it was just a similar kind of thing. Like, I just love playing bass with this guy. It's just, he plays drums the way I play bass, and that makes sense because that's how I kind of grew up. But anyway, So we were talking about the Beaulieu lineups. Yeah. So it's Lucas, myself, Robert, Paula, Jackie, Dad, And we're probably going to get Jody Robichaud on bass. He's kind of an extended family member.
There's so many of those guys.
Cousin. Yeah. But Jody's a great player, and he fits in really well. And I think I kind of want him in there because it keeps the instruments out front of what we're doing. And Joe, like, I could play the bass, but again, I don't like it.
Unless you're going to play a Rush tune.
Well, there's so much I want to do, like with a guitar or a keyboard or something like that I could add. That makes more sense for him to do the bass thing. And he's such a great player, and and I don't worry about it. With him in the mix, I don't have to worry about it. And he's another voice, so he sings great. He's a good harmony singer. Not that there's going to be a lack of singers up there, because we're all going to be singing.
Definitely. And even Lucas, he'll have the headset on. He'll be singing back up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm hoping I can get to see that, actually.
Yeah, man. So I don't know what the date is, but yeah, that's something the first time we've ever booked anything like that. So I'm really pumped about it. We talked about, for the last couple of years, we've been chewing on it a little bit, just saying, let's just make an annual thing and get together and play. We'll just set up somewhere with a PA and just play. Just, doesn't have to be 20 hours, just do 3-4 hours and get it all out of our system and get a little repertoire going so that we can make something work when we get a call or whatever. So this kind of presented itself, and I pitched it to them and said, what do you think? And they're all down. So I was like, well, cool. That sounds good.
Yeah.
You start. Better late than never.
So speaking of that band, so going back to your, I remember growing up, and it was the first time I actually heard somebody that I knew on the radio. Would have been your band, Tracer, at the time.
Right. Yeah. Number one song
on CFAN radio.
Yes, sir.
In Newcastle. Yeah. So how old were you when you started that band? And I mean, you guys were doing originals and you had the posters and you were traveling all around,
Yeah, playing. Man, actually, hang on a second. Wait, I got to tell you a story.
Okay.
Just give me one sec.
Yeah.
So do you remember Kevin Hamilton? Kevin he was the singer of the band.
Okay.
And just I think it was probably last summer, because I did some videos on YouTube, and he ended up finding them. I don't know if he's just creeping me, and I think that's what it was. I think he was actually creeping my name, and he got a few hits of I did that New York Minute thing and stuff. And he's like, oh damn, that's Roland, right? So then he saw my email in there and wrote me an email, and he's an OPP now in Ontario, and I hadn't seen him in it's been like 30 years. And we got talking. And so Kevin was the singer in Tracer, for those who care. And we just reminisced a lot about the band and how things kind of rolled around at that time. We were so young. And Kevin and I said, do you have any, like, I had never had any video or pictures or anything. I have nothing of that band. And it was such a funny time. Mm-hmm. Well, lo and behold, he's got everything. He's got all the shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he sent me everything, including these bad boys right here.
Oh my God.
Fresh posters.
Oh man. I remember like those show posters like that. So you would write down the venue. So it was a blank on the bottom, right?
That's
so you
right.
Write down the time and the place.
There you go. Live at.
It's proudly sponsored by Pizza Delight.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's still their phone number too.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Wow.
They haven't moved.
Yeah.
So
that was, and so it was really cool. I got to watch those again, and they were not nearly as flattering as I thought they'd be, but the video cameras were so terrible. And but it was neat. It was really neat to see and really neat to connect with them after all these years. I saw Teague last year. I was touring, almost 2 years now. I was touring with Corey out in Vancouver, and we connected together, and he was playing, he had a house gig at the Roxy for a long, long time out there. And Danny's in Florida. But anyway, so going back to that, the Tracer thing. Yeah, that was fun. So first I auditioned for them in grade 10 or 11, I think. They were already a band, and they had a hole for a guitar player. And I was kind of, at the time in high school, I had got a reputation by the time I hit high school, because I was doing variety shows every year, playing like Pieces of Eruption and stuff. And they're like, that guy, he shreds a lot. So anyway, they recruited me, and I went out there and jammed with them. And it was a lot of, the pop rock stuff at the time, Bon Jovi, Poison, that sort of stuff. So that was fun. I at the time I was playing with our uncles. I was playing in high school every weekend, and we were doing the Skidoo Club and Legion circuit at that time. By the time I was in grade 10, I was doing that every weekend, taking the bus after school to our uncles in Niguac, and playing a a weekend gig out there, come back home, either hitchhike on Sunday, or I'd catch a bus in the morning on a Monday. But yeah, so when I got the idea to join a rock band, which I was just dying to do, and these guys had they had big aspirations. They wanted to do big shows. They wanted to be big lights. And that's just something I never got to do. I'd go down to Moncton and see the boys down there, and they were all working in, teen dances galore, and they, big production that they'd hire Savards. And I'm like, oh, that's what we got to do. Right. So we would do the same. We would hire the Savard brothers and big lights, big PA. Like they were bringing in huge PA system, 5-ton truck full of crap and wirelesses and all that sort of stuff, building our stages ourselves and
smoke machines, all that stuff.
Oh yeah. The whole 9 yards. It was full Monty.
Lots of hairspray.
We'd pay. There was a couple of gigs there. I think we were each paying a couple $100 to play, because the production costs were so high, but we didn't care.
No, because it doesn't matter, because the next show you're going to make it big.
Well, no, it was more that we actually, you know what? It's funny you said that. It was more about, we knew that we had a very small window of time. When you're in grade 10, 11, you're done in grade 12. And we knew Kirk was going to be a doctor. Danny was going to be an optometrist. We all knew that they were going to go off and would never see each other again. So we just had this sort of time limit in our head that let's squeeze this lemon as hard as we can. We know we are what we are, and we'll go as far as we can go, and then it'll be the end of it. So we would just go for broke, and we were borrowing cameras from schools. We were renting recording gear. We're trying to get sponsors. We were rallying all over the place. We had radio interviews. There was a radio interview I heard on some of the stuff that he sent, and I didn't even know it existed. I forgot all about it. But funny, it's a funny time. I loved it. It was really, really fun with a variety show. We had the variety show at high school. It was a really big deal, and blew the doors off the place that day. We played 2 songs, full PA, lights, everything for 2 songs at the variety show. It was crazy.
That's what you did. I mean, that's what we did at the French school. Variety shows. We'd set it up. I mean, we were nowhere near what you guys were on stage. We played Teen Spirit and Enter Sandman, and there was no vocals, so there was no cues for transitions from a chorus to a verse or a bridge or anything. It was just everybody was lost.
Jams.
It was just it was terrible.
We were building risers at a 2x4 and putting wheels on them so we could wheel it out real quick. It was crazy. It was crazy. Some of the shit we were doing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But it makes for great memories and stories. You look back on that, and it's just, to get those posters again, I hadn't seen them. I have a buddy who wrote me and said, I still got my shirt. He's got a t-shirt that he bought. Really? It's too funny.
Probably doesn't fit anymore.
No, it wouldn't actually. He's a big jack now.
He's a big guy now. Yeah. So being from New Brunswick and Miramichi, and then, so you've moved to Prince Edward Island a number of years ago.
97. Yeah.
97. So you've been there for a while.
Long time.
And as you say, you're teaching lessons and stuff like that. So you've always been involved with the music community since day one of moving there?
Oh yeah, no question. I've been very part-time. I even did little tiny mini tours with Marcella. I got in with Ken McCall here early on. And if you're around here, for any the time, you'd know who Ken was. Ken was a really big player around here. He passed away when he was much, much too young, but he was a big influence on me. He got me to read charts and learn that whole Nashville system, and just working in the studio with him a little bit and getting to play out. Marcella's band was really amazing for me because it taught me the value of parts, playing parts, and how, one part, as little and insignificant as it was a piece of that Lego bit that would build the whole thing. And I didn't really get that entire, I was always about learning parts. So I had no problem picking up and lifting things, but I never considered things like chord clashing, where you have 2 guitar players and 2 guys are walking over each other. So I sonically to spread it out a little bit, and then rhythmically to play inside and outside of what the rhythm is doing. All those nuances Ken was so great at, and he was such a great producer of a lot of island artists, and treated all of their stuff with so much care and respect that you listen to it even today, and it's man, that guy spent a lot of time polishing up people that they were not exposed to any of that stuff, so it was really cool to be a part of that school. And I've always been, they had a Lobster Carnival here for a number of years in Summerside, where it was a pretty tough call. I think over 2 weeks you'd have to learn they'd be like 30 contestants, and they'd sing 2 songs each on a Thursday, and then there was an elimination. So this is before American Idol and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you'd had to chart all 70 tunes, but you wouldn't know what the other 2 song or the other song of that artist would be until whether they won or not on the Thursday. So there'd be an extra 35 tunes that you wouldn't know whether you're playing all of them or not. You're only gonna be playing half of them, but you don't know which half until Thursday night. So then we rehearsed Friday to do the show on Saturday for the finale. And then that was the winner was announced. That was a fun one because it was all about charting and playing together. Everyone was glued to the charts. The charts were the god, and that was a whole different school. Like it felt a bit like the Nashville thing, where you're exercising that part of your brain, and a very very professional too. Like all the guys I worked with, they were always really cool, and so that was kind of fun. We did a lot of that kind of stuff, and it always kept me into the music part. At least part-time. I was a career guy at the time with other things on the go, but music was always, I always had a little studio in the house, and I was always reading stuff and devouring whatever I could.
Yeah. So that, and then you you hooked up with, you say, Corey Gallant. What year did you hook up with him? Like
just a couple of years ago. Like well, Corey, funny enough, you mentioned him because I met Corey when he was about 18, 19. He was in the Lobster Carnival. That's how I met him. Trin Bradshaw, same thing. Trin was there's a video of me somewhere on YouTube. God, I shouldn't have said this, but I'm backing Trin up, and she's probably 12, and I'm playing with Trin now too. And Trin's, a couple of kids and in her 30s now. And so it's kind of funny that, all that history. But yeah, so going back with Corey, he was a contestant back when he was just a kid, and he did a record back then. He actually did a little bit of a record and launched it. It would have been around 98, maybe 99. And I played bass for him at that launch. I hired a bunch of guys to come in, and I was one of those guys that could get in and do charts and just pick it up quick. So I got a lot of calls for that kind of stuff, like a lot of one-off stuff, which is great for me because, I couldn't travel, and I was raising kids at the time. So it worked out really well. And I kept my hands into things. And then, so just a couple of years ago, Corey did the Tim McGraw thing for a long time. He was doing a Tim McGraw tribute thing for a number of years all around the world. And then settled down and became a paramedic and moved back to PEI. And when he came back, he did that record with Dan and needed a band, so we connected again. And
you guys are called the Red Dirt Posse.
Yes, yeah.
And you guys toured across Canada too. Like you mentioned, we did in Vancouver.
We did, yeah. Well, we did. His management's out of Seattle, so we've done 2 tours where we flew directly into Seattle. Believe it or not, it's cheaper to fly to Seattle than it is to Vancouver.
Yeah. Bigger
It's
airport.
crazy.
Yep.
Well, no, it's actually, I don't know if they could say exchange or some shit, but like Vancouver's like $1,600 and Seattle's like 500. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they're on
there's a few airports
that, it's bonkers. Same West Coast and everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we ended up flying. It was a long, arduous flight, and it's a lot of miles to put on. And Corey was new at the time, but we were hungry, and I just decided to go full time at the time, so I was all full of piss and vinegar, and to get back into it, right? Like, I mean, it was fun to just be back on the road again, and Corey's record was fantastic. I totally, believed in the record, and if you haven't heard that record, man, you'd love it, because it's like Corey's.
It's the good country.
He's a 90s country guy. I don't want to say good, bad, because there's, everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not the bro country kind of,
Those dudes, man, in Moncton, they just got it going on. They really did a great job on that record, I think. And so yeah, we recruited rhythm sections out there because we couldn't fly out 2 guys with us. So I would travel with Core, and we did 2 runs out there, and then we did a run in Toronto, sort of the Ontario area. And then we had scoped out a bunch of other stuff, but that all kind of just went to shit with COVID.
Okay, I know it's a bit of a sudden stop to the conversation, and that's just because there's so much more I had to split into 2 episodes. So the next episode will be part 2 of my conversation with Roland Beaulieu. So stay tuned. We still get into, and I don't want to give spoilers, but we haven't touched his drumming, and how he got 3 separate calls for the same gig, all for a different instrument. I mean, talk about being in demand. I do want to say thank you to Roland for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot. So for now, I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and looking out for one another. So until next time, ciao.